There is a robot living in a retirement home in Denver right now. It's hard to imagine, right? But you know what? It knows your name. It reads your face. It remembers what you told it yesterday. And when you're lonely, which for millions of elderly adults in America is most of the time, it's there. Not as a novelty, not as a gadget, as a companion. The robot is called Ryan, and the man who built it had spent 20 years working on a question that most AI researchers don't ask. Not just what can machines do, but how can they make people feel less alone. Welcome to Data Science with Sam. I'm your host, Sam Day. My today's guest is Professor Mohammad Mahoor. He's a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Denver's Daniel Felix Ritchie School of Engineering. He's also founder and CEO of Dreamface Technologies. Dr. Mohammad's research sits at the intersection of AI, computer vision, and social robotics. He has published extensively on facial expression recognition, effective computing, and human-robot interaction. And his work has been funded by the National Science Foundation and the NIH. His most visible creation is Ryan, a social companion robot designed for older adults living with depression, cognitive impairment, and dementia. Ryan reads facial expressions, holds conversations, plays cognitive games, and in clinical pilots has logged nearly 900 hours of interaction with real patients. Dr. Mohammad, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to have you here with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam, for having me. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure, to reconnect.
Thanks. So every story like this has a moment, a pivot where someone decides to dedicate years of their career to a problem most people haven't even noticed yet. So take us back to the beginning. What pulled you into the world of AI and robotics?
Oh, that's a very good question. So during my PhD at the University of Miami, I worked on face recognition, face identification. That was post 9/11. And then for my postdoc training, I joined the psychology department. That might, look a little bit unusual for a computer scientist to go and work with psychologists, but that was really a big moment for me. It shaped my career and it opened the door for me to do research, on AI and computer vision. Because back then the question was how we can use computer vision algorithm, which is, a subfield in AI and machine learning, how to analyze facial expressions and emotions of children with autism and how we can, interpret their gaze. So basically, we were using tools, computer tools to understand human behavior and how children with autism are developed compared to their, neurotypical peers. And then after 2008, I joined the University of Denver as a faculty, and I realized that robotics is really kind of a big research area here at DU. And that's how my research on robotics and AI and machine learning, all got started, as a new field of research. Because back then we were looking for assistive devices and how we can help children with autism. How we can use, for example, robot or other devices, assistive devices to help children with autism. And that what my aha moment or the moment that really was shift my career was working with children with autism and my postdoc training in psychology.
That's fascinating. So it's just, if I try to understand it properly, is the psychology collaboration at Miami wasn't just an academic detour for you. It is kind of a time where the engineering met the human problem, and that gave you the work in the direction of robotics now.
Absolutely. Social robotics, right? Back then I learned a lot, about face-to-face communication, social cues, affect, facial expressions, emotion, and social interactions. And so that influenced my research and my understanding of human interaction. And then later, how we can come up, how we can make machines to better understand and perceive people's emotion and feeling, and also relate to them or communicate with them at the more of a level that is more natural, more engaging and dynamic.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's fascinating. Since you mentioned the social EQ, and that kind of like brings me to my next question, which kind of related to the emotional intelligence part. So, what does it technically mean to build emotional intelligence into a robot? Where does AI end and the design begin? Especially given the fact that Ryan is more of a robot that giving that caregiving practices that directly ties to the emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. So we are working on artificial emotional intelligence. We as human, we are emotionally intelligent, same as cognitively intelligent, emotionally. Also, emotion plays a big role, in our understanding in the world and also reacting, interacting, and communicating because we are, a social entity, social animal or social individual. That's important, the social aspects. So when it comes to artificial emotional intelligence, it means robot or even machine, right? How they can sense social cues, emotions, eye gaze attention, even head pose or body language and interpret them and respond in a way that feels appropriate, feels natural, right? So you don't want to always have a monotone voice when you talk to machine, let's say with people. So, and also we wanted to have a feeling or a sense of people's emotion and then integrate it and empathize with people. So that was that's artificial emotional intelligence. And that's where AI comes to the picture, how we can use computer algorithm by machine learning, either supervised or other paradigms, how to sense facial expressions, how we measure emotion from voice intonation, how we can do sentiment analysis, right? When someone says, I am sad, and so on and so forth. So that's where AI comes to the picture. And also how you wanted to respond and what kind of responses you want to have based on different feelings of that might a person have. Right? If a person is sad, so you wanted to empathize with that person. Of course, we don't want to lie to them or fool them that pretend that I completely understand your emotion like human. No, that's not the case, right? Human dignity is something that we care about it. But it's the matter of appropriate responses and more natural and engaging responses.
That's definitely correct. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammad. I love the way our discussion started, and since you mentioned AI, that's literally paved the way for my next question. As we have seen, the landscape of what's possible in conversational AI field shifted
Mhm.
dramatically with the arrival of large language models. Just for instance, like ChatGPT changed the public conversation, but what I wanted to understand from you that how has the large language model explosion changed what's possible in social robotics, and what risk does it introduce that you always need to kind of be careful about when you're building the social robots or even enhancing your current version of Ryan?
That's a good question. So, 5 years ago, before ChatGPT, became like a large language models became commercially available, we used to create our, chatbots that were scripted. So I hired a team of maybe 6, 7 students from English department to write dialogue. And I don't know, we spent, a lot of money and a lot of hours to write, dialogue on different topics. But at the end of the day, we could just have 90 minutes, just 90 minutes of non-repetitive conversation and dialogues with our chatbot system. And that chatbot system was integrated into Ryan. And maybe after a day or two, you talk to Ryan and Ryan would say the same jokes, would repeat the same, responses, and always would tell you that, oh, I want to go to the beach, right? Or I want to go skiing in the mountains. And yeah, that's it. So it wasn't creative. It never came up with, new answers or novel answers. And also the domain was very restricted. The conversation, you had to script it. Let's say if you were a physicist and then you want to talk about physics or a mathematician, or you had interest in traveling to Australia, if you had not programmed, the robot to know or give it the knowledge, right? It could not do that. So LLMs really was a game shifter for us. It changed the way that our robot Ryan can converse with people, can answer their questions, and can basically engage them. And the larger the models, the better. At the beginning of the project, we use GPT-2, and also alongside that, we use some of the scripted dialogues that we have. We didn't want to recycle them or trash them, so we use them. But then GPT, a chat GPT especially, that was a moment, right, that we could see the potential and the value of using large language models for more dynamic, engaging conversations, right, with our robot. And now, with RAG and all AI agents, and adding tools, we can do a lot, searches real time and also checking on the news and so on and so forth. So things have been really significantly improved and came better using large language models.
Totally agree with you on that. The advancement of large language models helping every sector in building context engineering and all
Mhm.
those vector databases that can store billions of data points. And I believe that's the similar experience you're having while enhancing or even upgrading Ryan to build its contextual database that's it can feeds off every time. So thank you. Thanks. And before I move on to the next question, I would like to remind my listeners that if you are enjoying this episode, if you like the way the conversation going, I would like to remind you that Data Science with Sam team always open for new ideas, new topics. If you like to share your topics or any ideas that you want to explore further during an engaging conversation like that, please feel free to reach out to me. And also don't forget to like, comment, and share my podcast episode on YouTube and other channels like Apple's, Spotify, and iHeartRadio with your networks. Now, moving on to the next question. This is kind of related to Ryan's hardest AI capability to build. So, as you mentioned, Ryan can read facial expressions, it can hold conversations, and it can also memorize. Which of those
Yes.
AI capabilities was hardest to build and why? And the reason I ask, I'm pretty sure there's some listeners out there who are also kind of paving the way into the robotics fields. I'm pretty sure they'll be interested to know more about how the implementation works.
Yeah. So before I answer this question, I wanted to just go back to the last question that you asked about the risk of, using large language models. So hallucination is an issue, and overconfidence, and also sometimes, making mistakes answering some questions. So still there are some issues, right, that we have with large language models, and I hope that those issues can be addressed, over time. But and also computational complexity. Some of these models
That's
are
true.
really
Mhm.
huge and it requires a lot of resources, right, to be able to run them. And we rely a lot on cloud computing. But to answer your question on about, the hardest thing to do, right, when it came to integrating AI and also emotional intelligence into Ryan, it wasn't about the algorithm, honestly speaking. It wasn't
Mhm.
about integrating them. No, it's mostly was about the experience that users have, right, with Ryan, and we want our robot to be respectful and also to provide or give, socially appropriate answers and responses to our, to users' questions. So the experience was mostly, more important than just the algorithm or integrating a system or so. That in computer science or in computer engineering, you can always add more resources and come up with a solution, right? An engineering solution for the problem. But that wasn't the case for us. It mostly was about, the experience that our users have, and also the overall interaction and the individual's actually perception, right, of interacting and talking with machines.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, this is very helpful. And I would definitely encourage our listeners to check out the show notes. Over there, I share some information about Ryan and how you can also get in touch with Dr. Mohammed to know more about Ryan and what are the other AI and robotics initiative that currently he's working with his team, at DU. Now, moving on to the next question, and this is kind of, I would say, one of my favorites, given the fact that we are kind of living through the generative AI era. So, I would like to kind of like know a little bit about where does social robotics sit on the AI hype curve today, And what's the unlock for mainstream adoption?
No, that's a very good question. So it's nowadays is not about whether robots can talk or walk, right, or do things. It's more about what's the benefit of having a robot and have deliver measurable benefits, right, in engagement, in especially in wellness. Our robot is focused around on wellness and how robots can support staff and family members, and what's the benefit you know, uh, to them. So that's really the main thing, right? That we have been focusing on, right? The measurable, some to deliver measurable, benefit, right? Let's say related to wellness and how family members and caregivers can benefit from having a robot. What are the value propositions, right, of a robot? And of course, we need to make them affordable. Hardware is expensive, and also we need to make them reliable. Safety, reliability, and security, these are really important things that we are working on.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for your honest and very, I would say, relatable response here. Because when it comes to robot, like you mentioned, the common people think about the mechanical part of this, right? We've seen a lot of mechanical robots getting utilized, in the manufacturing companies and stuff. We could see robots are being kind of like working as like a household expert to provide a lot of like, running your chores or even taking care of your household activities. But when it comes to caregiver robots, like that's where actually we feel like the society still needs to evolve and think about how a social as how the AI's or robotics social aspect would benefit our human society, especially the research you've been doing with the elderly people and how they're getting benefited from being having Ryan as a companion, right? So that's definitely another some things that we need to kind of like keep an eye out for next few years. And I would definitely encourage our
Absolutely.
listeners to check Ryan, see how Ryan is progressing further and being a pivotal part of the society, especially in terms of caregiving and other services related to that. Having said that, now moving on to certain uh, kind of a very relevant topic that we have to ask, especially when you're talking about AI and robotics, which is ethics, safety, and trust, especially since we are dealing with an emotionally sensitive AI
Sure.
over here.
Sure.
So, how do you ensure AI deployed in emotionally sensitive environments like elder care stays safe, ethical, and trustworthy? Pretty sure you run a multiple checks, making sure all of those checks are properly kind of like, controlled in a simulated or even non-simulated environment. So could you please just kind of walk
Yeah.
us through that process? Yeah.
No, absolutely. That's a very great question. And indeed, from the beginning, of the
Mm-hmm.
project, when we started designing Raya and also running pilot studies with this vulnerable population, older adults, we started, with have it in mind that dignity is really important, right? And we always were honest with our users, those who either participated in research. We had to go through institutional review board, IRB, if you're familiar with, right, to get approval from the board to be able to do a study, and also consenting residents of these facilities. And even for some residents, because of their low, cognitive functionalities, we had to have their guardians to consent, right, to sign, and also do coercion quizzes. And then privacy was really important, and transparency. We always made sure to be transparent, right, and with with our users, and not just giving them a machine or a robot, right, to work with. So ethics, was really always at the top of our list, right, when it came to residents and users of our robot. Also, trust is not a feature that you add it at the end. You have to integrate it, and also you have to
Correct.
care about it at the beginning and build it into your system, right, from the very beginning. So trust and respecting, people's privacy and also dignity. So these are important, and being transparent with your users. Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally agree with you. Like trust empathy, these are all not a quantitative feature, these are all qualitative. And it's something that you cannot just
Mhm.
put in a mathematical formula and just fit it into
No.
Ryan or any robots, right? So you
Yeah.
have to kind
Yeah.
of like, build upon that based on and this is where actually AI and robots kind of like learn more from not a stimulated environment, but more from a real world by interacting with the humans.
Mhm.
So that's actually brings me to my next question, because there is always a gap between what the model predicts in the lab and what happens when real people interact with real technology. So what surprised you most about how real users interact with Ryan versus what your AI models predicted in the lab? Do you have any like a
Yeah.
funny experience or anything as such to share with my
Many,
listeners?
many actually, many funny moments, and also many, moments that really we were surprised, right? So, first of all, I was surprised when we took Ryan out of the lab and gave it to residents of a few senior care facilities to try it out, right? And one thing that I've noticed at the beginning, although our technology wasn't that great, Ryan was the chatbot was very primitive, was a scripted chatbot. And the bond, the connection between human and machine, right? The conversational agent, that was amazing. They loved it. And also when Ryan smiled or Ryan, told them a joke or said something funny in response, they laughed. They enjoyed it. We knew that that's a machine, that's an algorithm, right? That's just how it works, right? But they loved it. They enjoyed it very much. And some people, when we wanted to take away Ryan from some of the residents of those, research facilities, they cried. They were so upset. So we had to leave the robot with them for few more days and also talk to them, take pictures. And then we learned that we have to prepare our research participants and residents for the time that we are going to take Ryan away from them. So we gave them a notice, right? We spent time with them and also explained to them that this is a research project. And we promised them that if you're interested, after the study is done, we'll give you the robot to try it, right? For a few more weeks or so. But the bond, that what it really surprised me the most was the connection and the bond between Ryan and a human and the users. So that was really surprising to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your funny moments with Ryan, in terms of how it's kind of like navigates through the real world. So moving on to the next question, and I'm taking it back to the computer vision, like more of a research oriented question. So
Mm.
how has your academic research in computer vision directly shaped the AI architecture powering Ryan? Like, did you start with any fundamental computer vision models and then kind of build on top of it? And I'm probably going to use some of those models that came out, Dr. Fayfilly's labs like CNN or VGNet,
Yeah.
or I mean, have you used those kind
Yeah.
of foundational model?
Absolutely. So indeed, it's dream phase technologies is based on my research at DU, and that's how the research got shaped or started. Basically, the foundation of dream phase came from my research lab at the DU. We
Okay.
use CNN-based models.
Sure.
Nowadays we use
Hmm.
foundation models, other models, and I still rely a lot on my graduate students, and some of them and
Hmm.
come and work actually for the company as intern, or they work on research topics that is part of their PhD dissertation. Right. So I really mean that my academic research has been instrumental actually in shaping AI, the AI architecture, that is powering Ryan. That's been super, super, crucial and vital for me. Yeah.
No, that's kind of like fascinating and love to know. And someone like me, I've been a pretty big admirer of all those foundation computer vision models, and it's love to see they are still being relevant even in this large language model era to power some next generation AI robots. So thanks for sharing that with us.
No, absolutely.
Now, moving on to the next question. This is something related to the achievement you had in terms of securing funding from the
Hmm.
reputed
Hmm.
federal organizations, like you raised funding from institutional like National Science Foundation or even National Institute of Health, like also go by NSF and NIH. What's your advice to academic researcher who are listening to this episode are trying to secure funding for cutting edge AI and robotics work? I know this is a very difficult question to answer. There's a lot of processes to follow and a lot of layers there, but any tips that you want to share with our listeners, that'll be great.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So all my, that journey to become an entrepreneur started with an I-Core grant from NSF. And NSF, and also NIH, they have a program called I-Core. And they train students, faculty, and we had to pick a mentor from industry to help us out to, when we have an idea, to go and do customer discovery, talk to potential customers and present to them their, idea that you have that may have potential, right, to solve some problems. So academic entrepreneurship, is a different journey, than just being a faculty member doing research or teaching. So it requires slightly, or maybe to some extent, a different, skill set. You got to know how a company, you can run a company as a CEO if you become a CEO, or if you as a CTO, technically be strong, right? And whatever research that you do in your lab, that how that can be translated, right, into some sort of a business or a product or an MVP that can be commercialized. So that's important. And also my advice to people who wanted to take this path is to, first of all, make sure that your research is strong, because applying to NSF or NIH, SBIR or STTR program, which is basically research based, you have to have a very strong, research foundations and ideas and have an innovation, and then seek funds, right, to further develop, right, your research ideas and turn it into maybe an MVP, or even, one step back, it's just a prototype, right? And go out and test your prototype and then build on that. So you have to go through different phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then at some point you are on your own and you got to go and do fundraising, right? So having a spin-off company that comes off of a research lab is a slightly different than, I don't know, some of the products that you see that not, is research based, right? So for example, pharmaceutical, AI based, product, or robotics, right? Mostly this stuff requires heavy R&D, right, to solve major research problems and to come up with an MVP that would address the needs of, let's say, a population in my case, all of those. Yeah. I'm happy to sit down with any person who wants to follow this path. Usually give a talk. I have a deck of slides that on academic entrepreneurship, and I can explain to them different pathway, whether it's licensing, having licensing agreement with companies, or being a CTO of a company, or if you wanted to have your own startup and being a CEO of the company. So I learned a lot over the past 12 years, how to start up a company, how to run. And I'm learning every day. I'm learning something new, and is not an easy journey. And I don't want to discourage people, but I just wanted to tell them that 90% of the companies, startup companies fail. You have to be persistent and you have to have really strong idea. And also you should pivot, right? And when people give you advice, think about it and take it seriously. And if it's necessary, pivot, right? Not just to stick to the same, idea that you had that made you fail or partially fail.
Thanks, Dr. Muhammad. I do believe our listeners draw a lot of inspiration, and especially they probably take a lot of notes based on what you just mentioned about the house to secure grant and how you can basically progress further in your academic journey, especially if it ties to AI and robotics. And we all have to be adaptive, whether we are in academic journey or in industry or even building your own startup. I think the being adaptive is kind of like the thing that demands, especially in our current generative AI era. So thank you for all the advice. And I would definitely encourage our listeners to be in touch with Dr. Muhammad. He's active on LinkedIn. I provide some of his website and other details in the show notes, so please check it out. Now, that brings me to the last but not least question of this episode. What does the intersection of AI and robotics look like in 10 years? And where does Ryan fit in the future? Understand we do not have crystal ball, but what's your vision and how do you think that this AI and robotics field in conjunction with Ryan will, shape in
Yeah.
next one decade?
No, absolutely. Yeah. So you know that people nowadays called robotics physical AI or embodied AI.
Correct.
And at
Uh-huh.
least robotics is part of, physical AI, paradigm because we we have the physics-based, robot that or act, or move or whatever, right? That is based on the principles of physics. But then you have also AI to act like the brain of the machine. So I foresee that maybe in 5 years or 10 years, AI and robotics to be more personalized, more adaptive, more accessible, more affordable, right? And context aware and, and robots to be everywhere to do most of the tasks that might be tedious and repetitive. But I believe robotics should not follow path or physical AI or in general AI to replace human because there are certain tasks that cannot be replaced by human and also human dignity. And there are aspects of, things that we do as a human that cannot be passed to AI. And also currently, maybe for, we create a model for every given task, but I foresee that in the near future, you have one, AI model that can do many things. And that, is like foundation models or agentic AIs or agentic AIs, right? That they can do a lot of, things by just doing prompt engineering or just, prompting the agent to do things for us. So
Yeah.
it's going to automate a lot of tasks and a lot of things. And also it's going to be more generic and more adaptive and personalized, right? So that's how I imagine that physical AI is going to be in the near future. And Ryan fits into that future as well, because that's an early example of how social robots and wellness robots can help with older adults suffering from maybe early stage dementia and loneliness and social isolation and depression.
Yeah.
I hope I answered the question.
No, definitely you answered that. And you mentioned about that, there will be a time in future, maybe we will have one model. And there's a concept coming up, which Dr. Lick and even Dr. Faifel Lee also kind of talked a little bit about it recently is world model. I believe we are probably
Yeah,
heading into that direction. The world model
correct.
will be the one that's going to bring the power of LLM,
Hmm.
but not just a statistical figures or
Hmm.
not just like a data model, but it's also going to help us reasoning better or understand and predict better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed, I came, from the CVPR conference
Mhm.
that just ended yesterday, Sunday, June 7th in Denver. And world models and reasoning, right? Visual reasoning and understanding videos. I saw a lot of papers on those topics, vision, language, action, models, world models, right? That's those are the hot topics and those, that I'm sure that in, maybe in a couple of years, we will have world models that can be used, integrated into robots that can really do a lot of great things.
Thanks, Dr. Muhammad. This has
My
been one of
pleasure.
the most, I guess, fascinating conversation I had on my channel on AI and robotics. I mean, we can all agree to the fact that the robotics technology is impressive, and
It
it's
is.
just feel like we just have to make sure that we are making it to good use, which your lab already working on that. So I would encourage listeners to follow Dreamface Technologies. If you'd like to work with Dr. Muhammad or even want to know more about his research area, please feel free to stay in
Absolutely.
touch with him. Any last words or anything that you want to share with our listeners, Dr. Muhammad, before we wrap up this episode?
No, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And I enjoyed the conversation. Great questions. And I just wanted to say, just one thing that the future is not robots replacing care and human, but augmenting care and also empowering caregivers and human and family members. I just wanted to, well, at least the work that I do, we don't intend to replace human, caregivers. Because that's the question that always people ask me, are you going to take over my job, right? Are you going to, I'll lose my job. No, that's not what we wanted to do. And also in elder care, trust matters, more than novelty. So that's really important.
Thanks, Dr. Mohammed. Just echoing you,
My
AI
pleasure.
is here to augment our intelligence, whether it's a simple AI model or even a robotic. So every
Absolutely.
aspect of that purpose is the same. So
Yep.
if, to my listeners, if you work in AI, healthcare, or even data science field, and you're thinking about where your work could genuinely change someone's quality of life, this episode is one I would point you to for sure. I'm Sam Dev, the co-host of Data Science with Sam. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on all my audio platforms, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Apple, and Spotify. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.